Hello, I'm Ellie.
Hello. Hello, I'm Martin.
And today we are at the Culloden battlefield.
Interesting.
Very interesting. Come with us and we'll see what we can find out.
Hopefully loads.
The Battle of Culloden was fought on Culloden Moor, about 5 miles east of Inverness, on the 16th of April 1746. It was the climax of the Jacobite Rising and the battle that finally ended the Stuart claim to the British throne that had lasted almost 60 years. In 1688, Parliament overthrew the Roman Catholic king James II. James's Protestant daughters from his first marriage, Mary and Anne, successively ruled after him, but neither of them produced an heir, so Parliament replaced the Stuart dynasty with their German cousins, the Hanoverians. James II's Catholic son, James Francis Edward, had launched a series of rebellions in 1708, 1715 and 1719 in an attempt to win back the throne for the Stuarts. However, despite the support of the French and the Spanish, these rebellions were unsuccessful. By 1745, the Hanoverian dynasty was secure, if a little unpopular. So when Prince Charles Edward, the son of James Francis Edward, arrived in Scotland with an army of increasing supporters for the cause, there was little alarm. However, Charles Edward, known as Bonnie Prince Charlie, had gathered a 7,000-strong supporting army of Highland clans, who were known as Jacobites. The word Jacobite is the Latin word for James, and refers to James II, who was the overthrown Stuart king to which they pledged their allegiance. Charles's Jacobites defeated government troops at Prestonpans in September 1745. They then occupied Edinburgh before marching on and arriving in England in November. They travelled to Derby, but they failed to gather English support, and overwhelmed by British troops, they retreated back to Scotland. With the help of French reinforcements, the Jacobite army defeated British troops at Falkirk on the 17th of January 1746. But Charlie didn't treat the brave men who followed him very well, and by the time they came up against the Duke of Cumberland's forces at Culloden, they were poorly supplied, dispirited, and many had deserted. Despite his treatment of his troops and the fact that he had no military knowledge whatsoever, Charlie believed his cause to be irresistible and managed to rouse a 5,000-strong Highland army for the battle. His subordinate commanders were at loggerheads with him over his strategy. He had a very weak mounted division and only 12 cannons, all of which were different calibers and poorly supplied. His opponent, William Augustus, Duke of Cumberland, however, was considered a military genius. A strict disciplinarian, Cumberland had the confidence of the British army. He introduced a new bayonet drill to combat the Jacobites' favoured use of the sword, and he mustered an army of 9,000 well-balanced horse and foot soldiers, who were supported by 10 3-pounder cannons and 6 mortars. Charlie had planned to mount a surprise attack on Cumberland's camp the night before the battle. However, his army's lack of provisions meant that many of his hungry men had gone in search of food instead. So when daylight came, they hadn't managed to reach Cumberland's camp. Instead, they retreated to a field 5 miles east of Inverness, Culloden Moor. This proved to be an ill-thought-out choice, as their position now afforded Cumberland's army a clear and uninterrupted field of fire. Charlie's chaotic chain of command failed to effectively communicate orders to attack, and they were bombarded by cannons for almost half an hour before the Highlanders were eventually unleashed. They charged across the 350 yards of ground that separated them from their enemy. On the left, the MacDonalds. Sadly, they never reached the British lines. On the right, Clan Chatton smashed their way through Cumberland's front line, but after some fierce hand-to-hand combat, they were repelled, leaving just a few Highlanders to push through to make an unsuccessful attack on Cumberland's second line. At this point, a cavalry of Cobhams, dragoons and the light horse infantry flanked the Highlanders and routed them back to Inverness. In less than 1 hour, the battle was over, and the challenge to return the Stuart dynasty to the throne was lost. Charlie fled back to France. The exact numbers of brave Highlanders who lost their lives at the Battle of Culloden isn't known, but it's thought to be around 1,500. Cumberland's casualties were significantly less, just 50 dead and 259 wounded. In the aftermath, Cumberland's men harried the Highlands, burning homes and driving away cattle. The government sought to destroy the Highland way of life, banning them from wearing Highland dress, carrying weapons, and passing laws against the clan system. Cumberland was heralded, and the flower, Sweet William, was named after him. Handel even composed the oratorio, Judas Maccabeus, after him. However, the excesses of his troops meant that he lost favour with the public, who gave him the nickname the Butcher. He never won another battle and resigned his command soon after. The battle secured the dynastic succession of the House of Hanover. Indeed, our present king is a Hanoverian descendant. And by restricting interference from the French, it also paved the way for global expansion. Less than 10 years after the battle, Highlanders were being recruited into the British Army, and King George IV, as well as Queen Victoria, gave their royal seals of approval for all things Scottish. To this day, Culloden remains the last ever battle to have been fought on British soil. Linnock Cottage was originally built in the early 1700s and was here at the time of the battle. It was used as an infirmary to treat the wounded soldiers. It was lived in until 1912. This rebuilt cottage was used as the visitor centre for the site until the early 2000s, when the new modern centre was opened. The thatch used on its roof is made from heather, which has been gathered from around the battlefield site. The visitor centre houses an extensive and incredibly interesting interactive exhibition, which we weren't allowed to photograph. There is also a shop, cafe and toilets, and outside there is ample parking. The site is owned and looked after by the National Trust for Scotland. are, Culloden battlefield and all its fabulous history. We hope you enjoyed it.
It's been interesting. It has indeed.
Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Goodbye now.
Bye.